And the most important one is, why is the Ukraine border more important than the U.S. border? Why is this bill being rushed through with no support for securing our southern border? Ukraine must win and Russia must lose. There is no question that is what is in the best interest of America's national security. And it's why I have said that we should continue to provide lethal aid to Ukraine, paid for with seized Russian assets, so Ukraine can win its war and have a clear plan for how Ukraine will win. We need to answer these questions and be strategic about how we protect our interests, especially as we add to America's $34 trillion worth of debt, soon to hit $35 trillion. The American people will no longer tolerate borrowing billions of dollars to pay the government expenses and salaries of Ukrainian politicians. We are borrowing money to pay for the Ukrainian politicians. It's not a loan, it's just a gift. Nor will U.S. voters tolerate this government having no plan for how Ukraine will win, how U.S. resources will help it win, and how we are making sure that every dollar spent with one mission in mind, defeating Russia. And concern grows when we see that Ukraine has fired another top military official and seems to be struggling to show a clear path to victory. Without more information, we are left to assume the worst, that this entire bill has no clear mission but to accomplish the appearance of unity so that American politicians can fly over with a giant check and deliver hollow speeches about moral righteousness. It doesn't soothe our concerns when we hear the majority whip say on this floor that we must pass this now so that he can go to Munich this week and pontificate about a bill that the Speaker of the House has repeatedly stated that will never become law. Let me just read what the Speaker said today. House Republicans were crystal clear from the very beginning of discussions that any so-called national security supplemental legislation must recognize that national security begins at our own border. The House acted 10 months ago to help enact transformative policy change by passing the Secure Our Border Act. And since then, including today, the Senate has failed to meet the moment. The Senate did the right thing last week by rejecting the Ukraine, Taiwan, Gaza, Israel immigration legislation due to its insufficient border provisions, and should have gone back to the drawing board to amend the current bill to include real border security provisions that will actually help end the ongoing catastrophe. Instead, the Senate's foreign aid bill is silent on the most pressing issue facing our country. The mandate of national security. Supplemental legislation was to secure Americans' own border before sending additional foreign aid around the world. Is what the American people demand and deserve. Now, in the absence of having received any single border policy change from the Senate, the House will have to continue to work on its own will on these important matters. America deserves better than the Senate's status quo. So what we're going to do, this bill is going to be rushed through with no amendments. There will not be an amendment on this bill. So a bill that was negotiated in the dark by a few people, changed, only a few people knew that, is now going to pass. And the Speaker of the House has repeatedly stated that it's never going to become law. This bill accomplishes nothing. And if my colleagues were actually serious about aiding Ukraine in its war against Russia's invasion, they would work with us in good faith, sit down with the Speaker of the House and House leaders, and produce a bill that can pass here and in the House. As I said, I want Ukraine to win and I want Russia to lose. But that does not mean I am or should be willing to simply accept any offer thrown down by the Democrats that they claim, but cannot prove, will advance that cause. All while America is being invaded as a result of our open border. So if you're a general and your left flank is being invaded and you do nothing to shore that up, you get fired and you lose the battle. We are being invaded. I will not accept anything that ignores the most urgent threat to U.S. national security, Joe Biden's wide-open southern border. This should not need to be said here on the floor of the United United States Senate, but securing America's border is more important than securing the border of any other country. We represent America. We should be able to do both. And frankly, the fact that we aren't using revenue generated from seized Russian assets to pay for Ukraine aid is ridiculous. But that's how things work here. Your federal government cannot continue to stroke massive checks to borrow more money while providing zero accountability to the American people. The people of Florida are sick of this. I'm sick of it. I think about all Americans are sick of this. The deal has always been Ukraine aid for border security. Not immigration policy, but real border security today. Florida families are feeling the impact of this administration's lawless border policies each and every day, as deadly fentanyl criminals, terrorists, human traffickers pour across Biden's open borders. In 2021, how many children, 14 to 18-year-olds, died of fentanyl? Over 1,000, 1,145. That's a classroom of students dying each and every week. In 2022, I heard from a mom in Kissimmee, Florida, whose son was in the Air Force. He came home to visit her and surprise her on Mother's Day weekend. He visited an old friend who he didn't know had begun dealing drugs. The friend convinced the young man to take a Xanax, which was unknowingly laced with fentanyl, and the mom found her son dead. Can you imagine? It's heartbreaking. There are more stories like this all over the country. I don't understand why Joe Biden doesn't care. Over 100,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2021. 72% of those from opioids like fentanyl. Families in Florida and every state across the nation are being torn apart by these deadly drugs coming over the border. Think about how many families are being just torn apart as a result of this open border. My Democrat colleagues seem to finally be acknowledging this crisis on TV. But they're not willing to stand up to this president and force him to do what we all know is right: secure the border today. I can't imagine why. It's obvious to everyone that the invasion of our southern border is what Biden wants.